Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, and it's my delight, as you know, to be on your page today, for you to be listening to me. And sometimes it's just me, and you and I love that. We know that. And sometimes I have the most fabulous, intriguing, knowledgeable, inspirational guests, and you love that too. Today is one of those days where I have a guest that I absolutely have no doubt you are going to be just wrapped up in his aura. And I'd like to introduce to you the fabulous Jason Hewlett. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mary. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
It is awesome. And I love it. For those of you who are just listening audio and aren't watching on YouTube, you'll see Jason. He's sitting here and he has a picture of his family in the background. He has all these fabulous degrees and things around him. And so now, of course, you'll immediately go to YouTube and start watching. But the first time I ever met you, Jason, I remember two things about you. And one, you were literally the funniest person I'd ever heard on stage, ever. That's the first one. And the second one, what came across to me was that you are definitely one of the most committed family fathers I've ever met. And that comes across, and that through your faith, and that you're a man of God, and that through whatever you do, you bring that sense of integrity. And that impression back 20 years ago is still with me today. And that's saying something about you, that you're still funny, but you're still this incredible person of integrity.
Gosh, that's a wonderful thing to hear, Mary. What a compliment. I couldn't ask for anything more. And of course, being a dad is number one priority, along with being a husband and doing my best in my faith and those types of things. And wanting to be funny was how it all began, right? That's how we met, and doing events together.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that you got me events and helped me, with the opportunities in front of some of your clients back in the day.
Yeah.
That was so cool. So thank you for that.
And I think that you're the reason, if I remember the story right, that you would tell on stage, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you decided that you could entertain people the moment you realized one of your greatest talents that you had more than anybody else. And that it was, you could open your mouth larger than anyone in the world. And I thought, that probably is a great thing to do when you're an entertainer, because look at all the crazy faces that you can make and all the way you raise your eyebrows. People just, if they had to listen in silence, they would still love you. How's that?
Oh, that's very nice. And, I found out when I was a kid that I had a big mouth and that it was extraordinary. And anybody that's watching this will get to see.
Yeah,
that's
see,
a big mouth.
Open your mouth. Yeah, see, I can't even begin to. Can you put a grapefruit in there?
Oh, sure. No, I don't know.
Well, I was trying to explain to my partner, John, last night about this. I said, yeah, can you put an orange in your mouth? And he said, I think so. I go, Jason can put a grapefruit.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I used to stick my fist in my mouth, and my mom eventually said, you can't do that. You're going to permanently damage your mouth. And so I stopped doing that as a kid. But yeah, I could make big mouth faces. And then I found out I could do funny things with my face, such as control my upper lip. And I could go like a wave, like the ocean.
Yeah, like nobody else can. Have you ever met anybody else that can do that?
I've met people through the years that could do one or two things, but not all the things.
Craziness,
the
yeah.
Wiggle is really the thing that people go,
how you
does that,
and the witch. You're the only, the only two people.
Elizabeth Montgomery.
There we go. That's her name. That's her name.
Yeah, so figuring out the nose wiggle was a big deal. And people wonder, why did you work on that? And it was just because it made people laugh and smile. And I use it every single day since I've been a little kid. So it really does bring a smile to people's faces, and that's important.
Okay, I want to make a total disclaimer here so that people who are watching don't wonder what the heck I'm doing. I always, when I record these things, I always stare at the camera. And the picture and the feed that of the person is down about 6 inches. But it doesn't matter. I don't look at them. I look at the camera. Today, I'm not going to look at the camera. I cannot help but watch Jason. You are just like mesmerizing. So if it looks like I'm not looking at you guys, I just have to look at my friend Jason. Okay? Are we going to be okay with that?
And I'm doing the same. I'm looking all around. It's tough to keep the eyes on the camera when there are two fun, happy people on the screen.
And I think that is another piece, Jason, there's so many things I want to talk about today, but happiness is a huge piece of that. This profound sense that you're way younger than I am. Okay. But at my age at 69 and you at some undisclosed lower age.
Mid-40s, yeah.
Okay, yeah. What the piece that we do carry with us on a daily basis is that sense of deep happiness. That even though you and I find ourselves striving in our lives and still working at bringing things to this planet, there's this sense of happiness inside of us.
True sense of purpose, I think.
Yeah.
Understanding our direction, what we want to do and create and share with the world. And so that's something I've been striving to do for a long time, is to say how I think that happiness for me comes from helping other people find their happiness. And so working towards that each day is something that's very important to me to also be, congruent in my messaging. I mean, I can't be telling people to do one thing and I do the other. And so doing my best to be as least as a hypocrite as possible is another one of the things that make us happy. I think it comes down to what I call keeping promises. Yeah. And I love talking about that as well.
Okay. So we're going to jump into that right now, because you might think, okay, Mary, why in the world did you have an entertainer on the show? Well, because Jason is a bit more than an entertainer. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that, Jason, of how you went from being, a Las Vegas entertainer around the world, just really involved in that industry. And you kind of have evolved into this way more than just an entertainer. You're what I call a thought leader. And that people follow you, read your blog, listen to you on LinkedIn, like me. And not because you're funny. I mean, you're funny even when you do it, but not because you're funny, but because you are one of the most profound thought thinkers really on the planet right now. So how did that transition happen?
Well, Mary, those are great compliments. I appreciate them. And I feel the same about you. It's been amazing to watch your journey, read your book, listen to this blog. It's amazing what you've created for yourself and of your life. And it certainly is on purpose and unbounded. And so I love it. I would have to say that starting as an entertainer in Las Vegas, I found out early on that I had to keep a promise to every single audience, whether there were 7 people there or 300 people that weren't sound asleep. And that happens when you're performing. That happens when you're speaking or doing an event. That might even happen to anybody who has any type of job where people are disconnected, disinterested, and you still have to show up and perform and give 100%. Yeah. So I started my career in Las Vegas as a Elton John impersonator, and I'd come out on the stage. Oh. Yeah, I'd come on stage and I'd sing, can you feel the love tonight? And it was a great thing. And then I'd come back out on stage a little later in a show called Legends in Concert, where they would have Elvis and they'd have Michael Jackson and people impersonating them, really, really spot on, dressed up like him, sounded like him. Then I'd come back on stage as Ricky Martin, who was the Livin' La Vida Loca guy. And so I'd come out and
who, it's one of my favorite songs. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'd come out on stage and upside, inside out, living La Vida Loca. And nobody knew it was the same guy doing both characters.
Wow.
But because Elton John and Ricky Martin look nothing alike and sound nothing alike. And I realized really quickly that to keep the promise that Legends in Concert was promoting, which was you're going to see some of the great artists of all time recreated by amazing, singers and performers. We had to do something quite extraordinary. That's a big promise to keep.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to understand if once I left that company and put together a one-man show, which you were familiar with, I did about 100 musical and comedy impressions. That was
Yeah.
a G-rated family show. And I found out early on that I could create a niche very simply. If I just said, this is what I'm about doing things for families that they can enjoy together. And it could be Las Vegas quality, but like I call it, Utah friendly, because I'm from Utah. And it made a big impact. It created my career, being able to understand what my promise was to share something unique from the very beginning. So that's really how it all launched, Mary. That's how we first met, was doing those events.
Okay, I want to stop right there for a second. That's if we don't talk about anything else today, that's the message I would like people to take with them, is that you realized your talent. And in the entertainment industry, you could have morphed into so many different things to fit somebody else's mold. But because you decided and made the decision and kept the promise to yourself, you were able to define what your boundaries looked like. And then your success came not by trying to be like everyone else, but by keeping your own promise and staying in your own boundaries of what meant integrity to you. That's an incredible lesson for all of us who are constantly trying to be like what everybody else is doing. Like after this podcast, I'm getting ready to go to a women's luncheon for the Sundance Film Festival. And this morning, as I stood in front of my closet, I didn't say to myself, what do I want to wear today? I said, I wonder what everyone else will be wearing. Right? I wonder if they'll have pants or if they'll have dresses on. I wonder if they'll be casual or if they'll be more dressed up. I was morphing what I wanted into, what do you think everyone else will be wearing? Even today, at all the progress that I've made, I still find those thoughts in my brain and affecting my lifestyle. And you have risen above that.
Well, I still fight it, Mary. I mean, obviously, I wish I could say, yes, I've conquered all these things. But in reality, as a young performer in Las Vegas, I realized I was very blessed to get to be there with people that had worked so hard to make it to that point. But for me, it was the start. And I realized I have a lot more to offer. And that's not to say that those that are still there didn't have more to offer. That was their calling, their place. For me, I had a different space I needed to transition into. And one of my heroes, his name was Danny Gans. He was an entertainer impressionist who he signed like $150 million contract in the late 90s as not a household name, as a headliner in Vegas, one-man show entertainer.
I think I've been to that show several times, actually. Yeah.
He's the best. And a couple of years after I was doing my show, really an impersonation of his show, the people that brought him to Vegas were now offering me a headlining opportunity. And they just needed me to change a few things, such as it was no longer the theme in Vegas to be family friendly in the mid 2000s. It was
right.
What happens
they were
in
shifting.
Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah.
So they needed me to shift my act. And I said, I can't compromise what I know I want to do on stage. And they said, well, just follow what we tell you. We'll manage you. We'll shift your career and we'll take you to the top. And Mary, when I walked away from being a headliner in Las Vegas, that was a really big deal because I was then blacklisted from ever being a headliner again. And when you turn your back on your dream, it's a profound experience to then say, okay, I'm going to move back to where I'm from, which is Utah. I'm going to work, gig by gig to make this work because I believe what I'm doing is right for me. And that's how my career was created, is just one event after another, and for the audiences that wanted what I offered. And so I think, for your listeners, you might be thinking, I haven't had a Las Vegas opportunity or anything like that, but all of us have to define for ourselves what we're willing to accept, what our boundaries are, and what we're interested in doing with the talents that God gave us. And so sharing that really for me is very important so that everybody can think to themselves, what may I need to turn away in order to climb a new mountain?
Yeah, I love that. And my career on stage certainly was nothing like your career on stage. But we both are kind of a little bit in that public speaking realm. And in the last, decade since I've been developing that, there's been opportunities I've had to attend and speak at, even be a keynote one time at women's conferences. I love that. That's my genre. That's where I really shine. And yet, the group I know from previous experiences, this is less so now, but this is back, within the last decade. They were about men bashing. And they wanted to get up there and they wanted to say, how many in the room have been stepped on by a man to get their job? And then the hands would go up and the questions would go on like that. And I would begin to feel so uncomfortable with that because I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like it was an us or them situation. I didn't feel like that all men had been out to get me my whole life. I didn't. So I walked away from conferences and speaking engagements where it just was not a good fit for who I am. It's a tough thing, especially when you know that's your paycheck, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Good for you. Well, and that's a hard thing to do, especially when you're creating a new career or a new path for yourself. But we have to put ourselves upon the path that we feel is the right one for us. Even if everyone else around us is doing crazy things or losing their minds, or we watch them and say, wow, I wish I had that amount of success. Yeah. And we have to just forge ahead and say, just like you said in your book, which I love your book, by the way. I'm holding it up now because your listeners, if they haven't read it, they need to read this great book. In fact, Mary, when I got done with this book, my wife said, how was it? I said, that's as good as any book as I have read by any of my friends who are speakers. Because traditionally, a person who's a speaker is better as a speaker and not as an author. And that's not to be unfair, but that's a true story. They're on stage for a reason. I said, my wife, you need to read this book. That's how good your book is, Mary. I told my wife to read it. So I can't think of a higher compliment. But
I think that is true, Jason, because when I first wrote my book and it was 79 pages and my editor said, Mary, you don't have to add more to the story necessarily. But you need to stop writing like a speaker, because as a speaker, you're given 45 minutes and you wanted people to be able to read this book and get your idea and your thought in 45 minutes. That doesn't make a book. Is it because they don't see your facial expressions? They don't see your body language. They don't see your head in your hands. They don't see you squatted down. They see none of that. So you have to paint the picture. And it was a big light bulb went on. I went, oh, I see. And so then I went back and added another 79 pages and I was done.
Well, it's a wonderful read. And the thing that's nice about it is I did read it over the course of a day, but I kept coming back to it because I said, I'd like to spend my day this way. And that was an interesting choice because I don't feel like I normally have time to do that. Usually a book might take me, a week or two. And so it was that compelling of a read.
Oh, wow.
And it also, to me, felt like I was with you on that mountain. And that's what I wanted to share with your listeners, is to think, how am I on this mountain with Mary? How am I climbing along with her? Am I going one step at a time? Because just like you said in Kilimanjaro, how your group was ahead of you and they were younger than you, and you started worrying about when you first got there what they thought, and that you were too old, and all of those feelings of doubt, even though you'd worked so hard to get to that point. And then you're like, I'm going to do this for me. I have to just step one step at a time. And you stayed in the path of Big John, 1 foot, one step that he, what did he say? Don't go out of my steps.
Yes, stay right. You step or I step.
You step or I step, and
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So you did that. And I think that as your listeners follow you up their mountain, that they'll be able to reach their summit. That's what's beautiful about your work.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And in turn about your work. So you have written a blog for 10 years every week and never missed a week. Is there anyone else in the world that you know of that has done that?
Oh, certainly. That's nice of you to say. I follow a fellow named Seth Godin,
Oh, I
who
love
is,
Seth. Yeah.
yeah, and he's written a blog, I believe, for almost 30 years, every
Really?
single day. He sends a
Okay.
blog every morning that I read, and I go, how can this guy create this much content? It's stunning. So
Yeah.
yes, there are great examples out there of people that I've followed that I say, I want to be a prolific writer. But Mary, I started as an entertainer who pretty much did not do well in my school as a kid, who was told I would never be a writer, I would not succeed in a lot of fields, you know? But I started as an entertainer. I said, I want to write a book someday. I've written multiple books to get to the point where this book is the one we talk about. I've written enough blogs and enough things on LinkedIn that people say, wow, you have some great thoughts. But I believe a lot of it is because I just keep writing. I think failing enough, I've finally figured out how to succeed. So I
Ah,
call that the promise to fail.
I love that. So let's get down to the nit and grit of the promise. Explain to my listeners exactly your premise of the promise.
The premise of the promise is simply why set a goal when you can make a promise? And that's not to say that goals aren't important, but we talk a lot about goals and New Year's resolutions at the beginning of a year and things like that, where people almost say, "Oh, I'm not going to set any more goals." But I like to say that if you set a goal and you miss it, you just set another one. Whereas if you make a promise and break it, that's a one and done. So a promise really becomes your sacred goal. And goals are particulars where promises are proclamations. So, for example, if I say I want to get in shape, if I want to, change my life, my promise very well could just be, I am going to sweat every single day or something to that effect. I'm going to do
Yeah.
whatever it takes to be healthy today. Then you can set little goals to achieve that, whether that's hitting the gym, going for a hike, not putting the sugar in your mouth, those types of things. And
Yeah.
so goals still matter. But I like to think about the non negotiable promises that we make to ourselves. And just like you had a promise to your
Mhm.
grandchildren, I'm getting to the top of Kilimanjaro and I'm going to yell your names from the top. And I'm going to place this crystal up here given to me by a friend. And I mean, the things that you
Yeah.
promised yourself, I think that drove you up that mountain, even greater than
Yeah.
the simple goals that probably got you all the way there.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. It is you call it promise, and I love that word. I might adopt that word. I call it that commitment which cannot be broken. And it's the same idea. And when you make those, you absolutely cannot break them. I think about in business, I had certain, what I called back then, values that were unshakable for me, that were no matter what. And they were they were not the how-tos. They were not the goals. Like, for example, well, we want to make, we want to do 10 million this year. We want to do this, we want to do that, those are goals. But the unshakable things, that those are only accomplishable in alignment with our principle of integrity and our principle of being of service and our principle of doing everything with excellence. And when you actually have to come face to face with it, I remember earlier in my career, there were times when it was not easy. And I came up to paying my state sales tax. And I thought, really? I mean, like, no one would really know if I didn't pay all my state sales tax. I mean, they're really not going to audit me. Would they ever really audit me? I don't really know if they would audit me. And I really could. I mean, this is back when $1,000 was a lot of money. I could just like not pay $1,000 and help me out a lot. And then you're just like, what are you talking about? That's the commitment that you made, that which shall not be broken. And you think that you're going to be better off by breaking it? That's the fallacy of our thinking, is that we think we're better off by breaking our promises. And it just ain't so.
Yeah, it actually changes our confidence in ourselves. Self confidence affected. our ability to really feel energy from the source of power and of the universe and our God and whatever you call it. I believe even, whether it's $1,000 in state tax, which is a great example, or the other day when I was driving a rental car at an event, I drove from the airport to the event and I didn't even realize that it was so close. I should have just Ubered, but I
Wow.
rented the car. I drove, I came back, and as I was driving back to the airport to drop off the car, the, the dial was still on full in the car. And I thought to myself, this could easily be a thing where I could just pull back in. No
Uh,
one would ever know. But the promise is to live in full integrity. So I pulled in, filled up the gas. I think it was 36 cents, something like that. And then I drove to the car rental
okay.
place.
Okay.
Now, nobody, I mean, that's just one example of
Yeah.
like how basic it is to say to yourself, I did my best today. I kept my promise
I
to
brought my
live
very
my
best.
best life.
I love that. So, Jason, in the time we have left, and we're not done. So, but I would like you to think about if you could talk to 20,000 women. Well, 15,000 and 5,000 men. Okay. And offer them something that you would think would be so profound that if they heeded it, could change the trajectory of their life. Now, I have never asked that question of any podcast guest, but I know you. I know the depth of the way you think and the way you write. What would those things be?
That's an incredible question. Thank you for posing this challenge upon me.
That which you have never asked anyone else.
You're funny. I love you. Okay. Here's what I would say. Your promise is to discover that which makes you unique in this world. And that's coming from somebody who started his career impersonating other people. And within that, I created what's called the ICM process, which is how you discover your signature moves, which is what makes you unique. And so ICM stands for identify, clarify, magnify. If you will take the time to identify your gifts, if you will clarify it with others as to what they feel your gifts are, and then you take all of those great words that they'll give you and magnify that, you will then share your signature moves that only you can do. Just like Elvis had his lip move and his hip swivel and his cool jumpsuits and his songs. He was a great artist that we could just say, oh yeah, I know all of his signature moves right off the top. Well, how would I impersonate you? And what would that look like from a profound level? Not just the surface level of, oh, he wears his glasses this way or she does her hair that way, but rather, how does this person walk among us? How does this person change us when we interact with them? Because you have significant signature moves, and it is your promise to identify them, to clarify them, and magnify them with the world.
And that, do you believe that yours are so unique that if you don't offer them to the world misses them?
I like to say that if you break your promise and don't share it, then you're cheating the world of that which only you can offer. But in reality, Mary, a majority of us are not so supremely unique that will be known the world over. And so accumulation or cumulatively, all of our talents and gifts make us extraordinary to the world within which we reside, our community, our family, the people that we influence at work. And so if we can discover that for ourselves, it doesn't mean it has to be unique from all 8 billion people on earth. It needs to be unique to yourself, willing and courageous enough to share it. If you are that courageous, I think you can change any community, any group, any circle of influence you have. You can influence it. And that's where great leadership lies, is within keeping the promise and sharing your signature moves.
And if everyone were to do that on this planet, what would be the result?
I think we'd have greater accountability. We'd have greater happiness. We would see the greatness in each other and encourage it more. We would allow others to be the leader, even if we think we could lead something better. And then we realize they could do it far greater than we ever could.
Mm.
And so I think that we would join hands with people we don't agree with, and we would see their greatness.
Yay! I love that concept because truly, until you discover the greatness inside of you, it's impossible to see it inside of someone else. And when people say, oh, they're such a narcissist, they think they're so great, and blah, blah, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, no, no. The narcissist is the someone who feels so little of themselves, is so worried of not being enough and not worthy, that they have to see others that way to give them any sense of that I even can have this small spot on the planet. It's not that they think they are all up here. It's because they think they're all down here. But when you can see people right here, straight across, eye to eye, when you can see people as you and you as them, that's where the magic happens. I love it.
Beautifully said, Mary. I love it. You are a thought leader yourself, and I hope that you embrace that.
Well, nobody follows me when they follow you, but that's okay.
And they will. But here's what I like to tell you, and others that have asked. I have taught through the years some of the great entertainers and great speakers and great influencers who now make more money, have more followers, and have done better than me in terms of social or influence around the world. And now there's a point at which, as a teacher, you say, gosh, I wish I could have done it as well as they did. And then there's another point at which you say, I am so grateful I had the opportunity to rub shoulders with this amount of greatness. And so when we look around and we see others succeeding better than us, while others are saying, why aren't you up there with them? And you say to yourself, I'm just grateful that perhaps they're standing on my shoulders at this point. And I get to stand on others' shoulders as well to get to where I've gotten.
Because you truly have, Jason, identified your ICM, right? And so you know where your niche is. You know where the place is that you serve, where you are most empowered and where you can most empower others. And I love that. To be comfortable with where your place is. Can you just tell, like, I really like you? I was really kind of admire you. I think they're fabulous and, stuff like that.
Well, the feeling is mutual. And the truth is the ICM process never stops. I love to do that actually annually. And I ask people around me to clarify for me what I've identified to make sure that it's still where it should be going. And it changes throughout our lives. We may have identified 20 years ago.
Oh, wait a minute. That's a new revelation. Okay. I thought I was one and done, but you're saying that's not the case?
A lot of people think, oh, here I am, I'm in my 40s, it's over. Or, oh, I'm in my 60s, I'm done. Like, just like you wrote in your book, it is not over. It is a time for a new mountain. So I'm telling you, that's what's so nice about this process. A signature move may be you're really good on stage. And then the next thing you know, COVID happens in the pandemic and it's 2020 and you lose all your work. Now what? Yeah. What's your value now, performer? Yeah. So I had to make a few changes as well over the last few years to just not only survive, but continue to thrive. And that meant drilling deeper into my messaging. That meant becoming decent on camera, which I never was. I was only good on stage. And so things like that I've now identified through clarification, how to magnify my new talents. It's cool.
As I think back, I think you're absolutely right with me and with everyone. I thought my great talent was to be a caterer, to create a fabulous cuisine and to serve people like that and to be just the diamond in the hospitality building business where when people come, they would just feel embraced by me. I thought that was my calling. And then at retirement, I realized like, okay, if I'm going to live to 105, there better be something else. And so then I really felt that I had a calling to help people overcome what I wrote the book about, overcome and identify and overcome their fears. And that so many people go through life and never even realize that their life is being directed by their fears, even if they're not aware of them. And then after I did that, I still thought that was but then I was given a different one. And now I know that right now, at least, I thought it was for the rest of my existence here, but you maybe said maybe it's not. But my goal now and my entire vision is bringing people to oneness. To seeing people, I see you and you see me, and we know that we are each other. We are not separate. And I love that evolution in our process. How do you think people find that? The same way that they find their original ICM?
That's a great question. I love the part in your book about fear. And it really made me stop the book and think and write in my journal. What do I fear? What have I not gone for because I was afraid of what other people might think? Or what would my children think if I passed away, right now, why I never accomplished certain things or did things a certain way. And so I would say that the way into it is to face the fear. It truly is.
Yeah.
And if we face that fear, and if we're willing to fail, it's just like when you work out, you have to push to failure in order to proceed, in order to grow. And so the more that we promise to fail, the greater we get to a point where we say, oh, I've now pushed myself to a place where I didn't just rest on my laurels. I didn't just sit back on what I know is good and easy. And Mary, I'm fighting this currently. I'll share with your listeners something I haven't shared.
Okay.
It's very, very difficult for me to let go of all of the great musical impression pieces that I do that audiences still like to see. Whereas there are some audiences and clients that have said to me, we need you to not do as much of that. Whereas I feel that that's my way of connecting with the audience.
Yeah.
The clients say to me, hey, we don't want as much music and comedy and impressions. We want Jason the speaker. And Mary, that's hard for me to hear because I have the entertainment stuff to really feel like I'm giving them some great gift. And so in order to show up for each and every client as to what they want, that's a scary thing to face. As they say to me, either do more music and comedy or do less and don't entertain us, just motivate us. That I've never faced this before. This is a new fear and I'm excited about it because I think it's awesome to feel that I can get on stage and push myself to the point that the client is excited that I'm doing something brand new for me and for them.
Yeah. I absolutely am in love with this new challenge of yours. It's the epitome of the things that I talk about. We fear moving forward because we want to cling on to what we know and where safety is and what we know we can do, even if it's not working for us. And when we let go of that fear of not being enough, I'm really not enough without that, and actually step in. Don't lean in. I hate that phrase that we use now. Lean into it. Lean into it. I'm like, oh, please. Don't lean into anything. Step in or not. Step in. Then that's when the freedom comes. That's when the inspiration comes. That's when you see it. That's when you know absolutely that you got this. And I guess maybe, okay, here's my little bit of therapy for you, so listen up. That I want you to ask yourself, that thing that's in my book, what would you do, Jason, if you were no longer afraid?
Yeah, that was a question I faced myself when I read it. I thought, I cannot fathom that she, after weighing what you weighed, your age, and doing Kilimanjaro, to me, is an impossible, unfathomable thing. And I just look at that. As I read it, I had tears streaming down my face thinking, well, what can I do? And so I'm still challenging myself to think my new Kilimanjaro is to let go of not all, but some of those things that I say, these aren't serving me like they once did.
Yeah.
And this is not the blessing that the audience needs right now. Maybe they'll have me back another time. And I have an audience that's a client that's bringing me back in a month. I performed for them 2 years ago. They let me know that they need all new material this time. That's a scary thing. But at the same time, it shouldn't be scary at all. I know that if I showed up with my presentation I've done between, 15 and 20 years, that it would kill. But what if I showed up with something that was specific for them that I've never said before? That would push me, that would push them. So those are the, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? That's what I'm going for right now.
And it's not even that you couldn't fail, if it's that you weren't afraid.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think about you, Jason, as the funniest guy I know, and that I would miss that piece of you. But I'll tell you, the reason I follow you now and read your words is not because you're the funniest person I know. It's because you have such profound things. And if you were to let go of most of that, you just have to be a little funny and lean into them and look them in the eye and offer that profoundness through love, it would be more impactful than being funny.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's the feedback I've received in less profoundly said ways, Mary. So thank you.
I'll send the bill.
Please do.
Jason, you are such a delight. Thank you for being with me today. At the end of this podcast, we do have all the links to find him and follow him. And, I follow a lot of different people and like to read little things from them every day. And Jason, you are one that lifts me, that brings me hope, brings me insight into new ways of thinking of things. And I hope that all of my listeners will follow you and love you the way I love you. Thanks for being here.
Love you too. Thank you.
All right. Until next time, continue to craft your meaningful life. Thank you.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.